The Onyx Room lived deep underground, far below the bright lights and loud noises of the city. It was a place where the air always felt heavy, smelling like expensive leather and old cigars. In this world of shadows, Tasha Williams was a ghost. She moved through the private booths with a tray in her hand, her back straight and her eyes down. To the powerful men who came here to trade secrets, she was just a part of the furniture. They never looked at her face. And they never guessed that the woman pouring their water had once been a genius in a laboratory. For Tasha, silence was a habit she had learned the hard way. A few years ago, her life had been about white lab coats and glass tubes. She had been a rising star in chemistry, a prodigy who could see how atoms danced together. But a big company had stolen her work and blamed her for their mistakes. They took her career and left her with nothing but a mountain of debt. Now, instead of mixing life-saving medicine, she polished wine glasses until they shined like diamonds. She had learned that being invisible was the safest way to survive. If no one noticed you, no one could hurt you. The heavy doors of the lounge swung open, and the energy in the room changed instantly. It was like a cold wind had blown in. Tasha didn't have to look up to know who had arrived. The whispers stopped, and the bodyguards near the entrance stood a little taller. Seo Kang-Woo walked in with a slow, steady pace that made everyone else seem nervous. He was the boss of the Korean Mafia, a man who ruled with a calm but terrifying strength. He wore a dark suit that fit him perfectly, and his black hair was slicked back, showing a face that looked like it was carved from stone. Beside him walked Jung Dae-Sung, his lead planner. Dae-Sung was younger, with a sharp smile that never quite reached his eyes. He talked fast and moved with a restless energy, always checking his gold watch. Behind them, a line of men in black suits followed, their hands resting near their jackets. They moved toward the Polaris suite, the most private room in the club. Tasha felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She was assigned to their table tonight. As they sat down, the air became thick with a different kind of tension. It wasn't just about power, it was about the secrets they were carrying. Kang-Woo sat at the head of the table, his large, tattooed hands resting flat on the wood. He didn't speak much. He just watched. Tasha stepped forward, her movements smooth and practiced. She poured the dark red wine into their glasses, her hands steady even though her heart was racing. She noticed the small details that others missed. She saw the way Dae-Sung's fingers trembled slightly as he pushed a document toward the boss. She saw the way the light caught a strange, oily film on the surface of Kang-Woo's drink. To anyone else, it was just a reflection. To Tasha, it looked like a chemical reaction. She stayed in the shadows of the corner, waiting for the next order, her mind already starting to analyze the room like a science experiment. In the Onyx Room, silence was her shield, but her eyes were seeing things that were about to change everything. Tasha stood in the corner of the room, her back against the dark wood wall. She was a shadow in a black vest, holding a silver tray against her side. To the men at the table, she was invisible. They did not look at her, so they did not see how closely she was watching them. Jung Dae-Sung, the younger man with the sharp smile, leaned toward the boss. He started to speak in Korean. His voice was low and fast, like the sound of a snake sliding through dry grass. He thought he was safe because they were in an American club. He assumed the black waitress standing 5 feet away only understood English. He was wrong. Tasha's mind flashed back to her years in Seoul. She remembered the cold mornings in the research lab and the long nights studying chemical formulas in a small apartment. She had learned the language perfectly so she could work with the best scientists in the world. Now, every word Dae-Sung said hit her like a physical blow. It will look like his heart just stopped, Dae-Sung whispered in Korean. He glanced at Seo Kang-Woo, who was busy reading a contract on the table. The mixture is perfect. It is clear and has no taste. By the time the ambulance arrives, the chemical will be gone from his blood. You will be the new leader before the sun comes up. Tasha felt a chill run down her spine. She looked at the wine glass, sitting in front of Kang-Woo. The red liquid looked normal to everyone else, but Tasha's eyes were trained to see what others missed. She noticed a tiny, oily ring floating on the surface of the wine. It moved differently than the alcohol. It was heavier. In an instant, she recognized it. It was Formula 9. She knew that chemical better than anyone. It was a neurotoxin she had studied back when she was a scientist. It was designed to shut down the human nervous system in minutes. It was a liquid weapon, and it was sitting just inches from the boss's lips. Tasha's heart began to beat fast against her ribs. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a witness to a murder. Dae-Sung reached out and picked up his own glass. He raised it in the air for a toast. "To our future, boss," he said in English, his voice sounding fake and cheerful. "To a long life and more power." Kang-Woo stopped reading. He looked up from the paper and reached for his glass. His large, tattooed hand wrapped around the thin stem of the wine glass. He began to lift it toward his mouth. Tasha's breath caught in her throat. If he took one sip, he would be dead before he hit the floor. She knew she had to do something, but the room was full of armed guards. If she moved too fast, they might shoot her. If she said the wrong thing, Dae-Sung would realize she knew his secret. She looked at the glass, then at the boss's eyes, and then at the traitor who was smiling behind his wine. The clock in her head was ticking. She had spent years trying to stay out of trouble and hide from the world, but science didn't lie. The reaction in that glass was lethal. And she was the only one in the room who could stop the explosion before it started. As Tasha watched Kang-Woo's fingers tighten around the glass, the dim lights of the Onyx Room seemed to fade away. For a split second, the smell of expensive cigars was replaced by the sharp, clean scent of bleach and rubbing alcohol. The dark walls of the lounge turned into the bright, white tiles of a high-tech laboratory in Seoul. In her mind, she was back there, standing at a silver desk with a microscope and a dream. Back then, Tasha didn't wear a waitress vest. She wore a crisp white lab coat with her name stitched on the pocket. She had been the youngest researcher in the building, a girl from a small town who had traveled halfway across the world because she was a master of molecules. Her hands didn't carry trays. They held glass tubes filled with bright liquids that could save lives. She had spent 2 years working on a new medicine that would help people with weak hearts. She called it her life formula. She believed that science was a gift meant to heal the world. But the men who ran the laboratory didn't care about healing. They cared about money and power. Tasha remembered the day her boss, a man with cold eyes and a fake smile, walked into her station. He had taken her notes and her hard drive. He told her that her life formula was being changed. They weren't going to use it to save hearts anymore. They had found a way to flip the chemical switch, turning her medicine into a silent killer, Formula 9. It was the same oily liquid she was looking at right now in the Onyx Room. "You can't do this," Tasha had told them, her voice shaking with anger. Science isn't supposed to be a weapon. The men had laughed at her. Because she was young and had no one to protect her. They decided to make her the scapegoat. They erased her name from the research. They told the police that she had stolen company secrets and tried to sell them. They took her brilliance and used it to build a shadow. Then they threw her into that shadow and locked the door. She had lost everything, her career, her reputation, and her faith in people. The memory burned in her chest like acid. She had moved back to the United States and taken this job in the subterranean lounge just to disappear. She had promised herself she would never care about science or chemistry again. She had decided that the world was full of monsters, and the best thing a girl like her could do was stay quiet and pour their drinks. But seeing Formula 9 again changed everything. The sight of that oily ring in the wine glass wasn't just a threat to the man sitting at the table. It was an insult to her entire life's work. It was a reminder of the people who had used her brain to create a way to kill. As the white walls of the lab faded and the dark shadows of the Onyx Room returned, Tasha felt a new kind of heat rising in her blood. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a cold, sharp anger. She hated that science was being used for murder right in front of her. She hated that another man with a fake smile was trying to destroy a life with a chemical he didn't even understand. She looked at Kang-Woo, who was just seconds away from drinking the poison. Then she looked at Dae-Sung, who was waiting for the kill with a predatory look in his eyes. Tasha realized she couldn't just be a ghost anymore. She had spent years being silent while bad people won. If she stayed quiet now, she was letting the laboratory win all over again. Her hands, which had been so still a moment ago, began to itch for a reaction. She was a chemist, and every chemist knows that when you add the right element at the right time, you can stop a dangerous explosion. She wasn't just a waitress in a black vest. She was the only person who knew the math of the poison, and she was done being invisible. Tasha's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Kang-Woo's hand was steady as he raised the glass. In another 2 seconds, the wine would touch his lips, and the Formula 9 would begin its silent, deadly work. Tasha didn't have a lab or a test tube anymore, but she still knew how to calculate a reaction. She needed a distraction, a mess, and a miracle. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the shadows. She moved toward the table, her eyes fixed on a small silver pitcher of water sitting near the edge. She didn't look at Dae-Sung, who was watching the boss with a hungry look. She didn't look at the guards with their hands on their belts. She focused only on the target. As she reached the table, she made her move. She didn't just trip. She performed a stumble that she had practiced in her mind 1,000 times. Her foot caught the edge of a chair, and she let her body lean forward with all her weight. With a loud gasp, she reached out as if to catch herself. Her hand slammed into the silver pitcher, sending a wave of cold water across the white tablecloth. "Oh, I am so sorry," Tasha cried out. Her voice was high and shaky, sounding exactly like a nervous waitress who had just made a huge mistake. The water splashed everywhere. It soaked the contracts Kang-Woo was reading and ran toward the edge of the table. Everyone jumped back. The guards reached for their jackets, their eyes darting around the room to see if there was an attack. In that moment of pure chaos, Tasha's hands became a blur of motion. As she leaned over to help clean the spill, her left hand swept toward Kang-Woo's poisoned glass. She didn't knock it over, she gripped it tight. At the exact same time, her right hand grabbed a fresh, clean glass of wine she had hidden on her serving tray just moments before. In the blink of an eye, she pulled the poisoned glass toward her chest and set the clean one down in its place. It happened so fast that even the cameras in the room wouldn't have caught it. To the men at the table, it just looked like a clumsy girl was panicking. "You stupid girl," Dae-Sung shouted. He stood up, his face turning red with anger. He wasn't mad about the water. He was mad that the moment of the toast had been ruined. He reached out to grab Tasha's arm, but Kang-Woo held up a hand. The boss didn't move. He sat perfectly still as water dripped off the edge of the table onto his expensive shoes. He looked at the wet papers, then he looked at Tasha. His dark eyes were sharp and cold, like he was trying to read a secret written on her face. Tasha kept her head down, her hands shaking as she used a cloth to soak up the water. She could feel the poisoned glass hidden behind the tray on her arm, its weight feeling like a bomb. I am so sorry, sir," Tasha whispered, her voice trembling. "Let me get you a fresh towel. I am so clumsy." Dae-Sung was breathing hard, his eyes darting toward the wine glass on the table. He didn't realize it had been swapped. He just saw that a glass of red wine was still sitting there, waiting to be finished. He tried to calm himself down, straightening his tie. "Just leave it," Dae-Sung snapped at her. "Go get the towels and stay out of the way." Tasha nodded quickly and backed away, her heart still racing. She had done it. She had performed the swap right under the noses of the most dangerous men in the city. As she retreated toward the kitchen, she risked one last look back. Kang-Woo was still staring at her. He hadn't picked up the glass yet. He looked at the fresh wine, then back at Tasha's retreating figure. For a second, Tasha wondered if he had seen the truth. She had saved his life, but in this world, sometimes saving a life was just as dangerous as taking one. She disappeared through the swinging doors, the poisoned glass gripped tight in her hand, knowing that the real experiment had only just begun. The kitchen doors closed behind Tasha, but she didn't stay there. She quickly poured the poisoned wine down a drain, watching the dark red liquid swirl away like a dying secret. She rinsed the glass with shaking hands, her heart still thumping against her ribs. She grabbed a stack of fresh, white towels and took a deep breath. She had to go back. If she disappeared now, it would look suspicious. She had to play the part of the clumsy waitress until the very end. When she walked back into the Polaris suite, the air felt like a frozen lake. Nobody was talking. The water from the spill was still dripping slowly off the edge of the table, making a soft tap-tap-tap sound on the floor. Dae-Sung was sitting on the edge of his chair, his eyes locked on the wine glass. He looked like a man watching a fuse burn down on a bomb. He was waiting for the moment the boss would take a sip and fall. Kang-Woo had not touched the glass yet. He was leaning back, his large arms folded across his chest. He looked calm, but his eyes were moving. He looked at the wet papers on the table, then at his guards, and finally at Tasha as she stepped forward with the towels. He didn't say a word. He just watched her as she knelt down to dry the floor near his feet. "The mess is almost gone, sir," Tasha whispered, her voice small and careful. She kept her eyes on his shoes, avoiding the heavy stare she felt coming from above. "The toast, boss," Dae-Sung said, his voice cracking just a little bit. He tried to laugh, but it sounded dry and forced. "We shouldn't let a little water ruin such a big night." To the new deal. Dae-Sung picked up his own glass again. His hand was shaking so much that the wine rippled against the glass walls. He was desperate. He needed Kang-Woo to drink. He needed the poison to work, so he could stop being afraid of the man sitting next to him. Kang-Woo finally moved. His hand reached out, slow and steady. Unlike Dae-Sung, his fingers didn't tremble at all. He picked up the clean glass, the one Tasha had swapped in. He didn't look at the wine. He didn't check for the oily ring that was no longer there. Instead, he turned his head and looked directly at Dae-Sung. The look in Kang-Woo's eyes was like a predator watching a trapped animal. It was a look that said he already knew someone was lying. He held the glass up, but he didn't drink. He just stared at his advisor, holding the moment until the silence became painful. Dae-Sung's face began to pale. A small bead of sweat rolled down his forehead. He looked like he wanted to scream or run, but he was frozen under the boss's gaze. "You seem nervous," Dae-Sung, Kang-Woo said. His voice was deep and smooth, like a low roll of thunder. "Is there something wrong with the wine?" Dae-Sung gulped, his Adam's apple moving up and down. "No, boss. Of course not. It is the best bottle in the house." Kang-Woo tilted the glass. He didn't take a small sip. He took a long, deep drink, draining half the glass in one go. Tasha held her breath. Even though she knew she had swapped the wine, a tiny part of her was still terrified. She waited for the cough, the gasp, or the collapse. She waited for the guards to start shooting. But nothing happened. Kang-Woo set the glass down on the table with a firm clack. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and continued to stare at Dae-Sung. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Dae-Sung's eyes grew wide. He kept looking at Kang-Woo's chest, waiting for his heart to fail. He looked at the boss's face, expecting it to turn blue. But Kang-Woo just sat there, looking stronger than ever. The unmoved king lived up to his name. He wasn't dying. He wasn't even dizzy. The color drained completely from Dae-Sung's face. He realized that the plan had failed, but he couldn't understand why. He had put the poison in himself. He had watched the glass. How was the boss still breathing? Kang-Woo leaned forward, his shadow falling over the table. He didn't look at the traitor anymore. He looked over at Tasha, who was still holding the wet towels. For a split second, a tiny spark of something, maybe respect, maybe curiosity, flashed in his dark eyes. He knew he should be dead, and he knew exactly who had stopped it from happening. "The wine is excellent," Kang-Woo said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "But I think someone here has made a very big mistake." Dae-Sung began to shake uncontrollably. He knew the end was coming. Tasha stood up slowly, clutching the towels to her chest. The trap had been sprung, and the predator was finally ready to hunt. The silence in the Polaris suite didn't just feel cold anymore. It felt like a bomb that had already been lit. Dae-Sung looked like he was shrinking into his expensive leather chair. His eyes kept darting from the empty wine glass to Kang-Woo's face, searching for a sign of pain that never came. He couldn't understand it. He had spent months planning this chemical heart attack, and now the man he tried to kill was staring at him with more life in his eyes than ever before. "Why aren't you drinking, Dae-Sung?" Kang-Woo asked. His voice was very quiet, which made it 10 times scarier than a scream. "You made a toast to the future. You should finish your glass." Dae-Sung's hand shook so hard that the wine splashed over the rim of his glass, staining his white shirt like a fresh wound. I think I am feeling a bit sick, boss. Perhaps the sea base was bad." Kang-Woo didn't blink. He reached out and wrapped his large, tattooed hand around Dae-Sung's wrist. The sound of the younger man's bones creaking under the pressure was the only noise in the room. "The fish is fine," Kang-Woo whispered. "But the air in this room is poisoned. It smells like a traitor." Suddenly, the calm exploded into violence. Kang-Woo didn't just let go. He shoved Dae-Sung backward so hard the chair flipped over. The guards in the room reacted instantly. They didn't draw their guns to protect Dae-Sung. They pointed them straight at him. They had seen the boss drink the wine and stay standing. They saw the fear on the planner's face. In their world, fear was an admission of guilt. "Check the bottle." Dae-Sung shrieked from the floor, his voice cracking like breaking glass. "Check the glass. Something is wrong. He should be dead." As soon as those words left his mouth, the room went deathly still. Dae-Sung realized too late what he had said. He had just admitted that he expected the boss to be a corpse. Kang-Woo stood up slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the fallen man. He didn't look like a businessman anymore. He looked like a king about to pass a sentence. "You knew the wine was supposed to kill me," Kang-Woo said. He stepped over the spilled water Tasha had cleaned only moments ago. But I am still standing. That means someone else in this room is smarter than you. Someone knew exactly what you were trying to do. He turned his head and looked directly at Tasha. She was still standing by the wall. The wet towels gripped so tightly in her hands that her knuckles were white. Her heart was beating so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. She was just a waitress. A girl who had tried to hide her brain from the world, and now the most dangerous man in the city was looking at her like she held the keys to the kingdom. Seo Kang-Woo said, pointing a finger at her. The girl who is so clumsy she saves lives. Come here. Tasha's legs felt like lead, but she forced herself to move. She walked past the guards, past the crying man on the floor, and stopped right in front of the boss. She didn't look down at her shoes this time. She looked him right in the eye. She saw the curiosity there. But she also saw a cold, hard intelligence that matched her own. Take him to the back, Kang-Woo ordered his guards, never taking his eyes off Tasha. I want to know where he got the formula. I want to know who else is part of this contingency. The guards grabbed Dae-Sung by his arms and dragged him out of the suite. His screams for mercy echoed down the hallway until a heavy door slammed shut, cutting off the sound. The chemical warfare of the meeting was over, and the fallout was beginning. Kang-Woo tilted his head, studying Tasha like she was a rare element he had never seen before. You didn't just spill that water, he said. It wasn't a question. You saw something in that glass. Something a waitress shouldn't be able to see. Tasha took a steady breath. The ghost of the lab was fading, and the chemist was waking up. It was Formula 9, she said clearly. It has an oily sheen when it hits the acid in the wine. If you had swallowed it, your heart would have stopped in 90 seconds. Kang-Woo's eyebrows went up. He had spent millions of dollars on security and tasters. But a girl in a black vest had seen a molecule that his best men had missed. He realized then that Tasha wasn't just a lucky servant. She was a weapon he hadn't known he had. Formula 9 is a ghost story, Kang-Woo said. Only a few people in the world even know it exists. How does a waitress in a basement lounge know its name? Tasha felt the old anger from the laboratory rising up, but this time, she didn't push it down. She used it. Because I'm the one who invented the base for it, she said. And I'm the only one who knows how to stop it. A slow, dark smile spread across Kang-Woo's face. It wasn't a kind smile, but it was an honest one. He reached out and took the serving tray from her hand, tossing it onto the table as if it were trash. The Onyx Room is no place for a woman with your brain, he said. He gestured toward the inner door, the private office where the real decisions were made. Follow me. We have a lot of people to find, and I think you're the only catalyst I need to finish the job. Tasha didn't hesitate. She left the towels and the tray behind. She walked into the inner sanctum of the syndicate, stepping out of the shadows of the lounge and into the light of a very dangerous new life. The inner office of the Onyx Room was even quieter than the lounge outside. The walls were lined with dark velvet, and the only light came from a single green lamp on a heavy wooden desk. Kang-Woo sat down in a large leather chair. He didn't look like a man who had almost died 5 minutes ago. He looked like a scientist studying a strange new bug under a microscope. He pointed to the chair across from him, and Tasha sat down. She felt small in the big room, but she kept her back straight. You said a very interesting name back there, Kang-Woo began. His voice was calm, but it had a sharp edge to it. Formula 9. My security experts told me that poison doesn't exist. They said it was just a rumor used to scare people. Yet, you saw it in a glass of red wine from across the room. How? Tasha took a deep breath. The air in the office smelled like old paper and expensive ink. She knew that if she lied now, she would never leave this room. But if she told the truth, her life as a ghost would be over forever. She looked at her hands. They were stained with a little bit of the wine she had cleaned up. It exists because I built the foundation for it, Tasha said. Her voice was steady, even though her heart was still thumping. 3 years ago, I was a researcher at a lab in Seoul. I wasn't trying to make a poison. I was trying to make a medicine to help people with heart disease. I wanted to create a chemical that could jumpstart a heart that was failing. Kang-Woo leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. A chemist. I thought you were just a waitress who moved too fast. I was a prodigy, Tasha said, and for the first time in years, she felt a spark of pride. I spent my whole life studying how molecules react to each other. I moved to Korea on a special fellowship because I was the best in my field. But the people I worked for were greedy. They realized that if they changed one small part of my formula, it wouldn't save a heart, it would stop one. It became the perfect weapon because it leaves no trace. It disappears into the blood like it was never there. She paused, remembering the cold white lights of the lab and the way her bosses had looked at her when they stole her notes. When I found out what they were doing, I tried to stop them. So, they ruined me. They told the police I was a thief. They took my degree, my job, and my name. They turned me into a criminal, so no one would believe the truth. That is why I am a waitress in a basement, Mr. Seo. I was hiding from the monsters who stole my life. Kang-Woo watched her for a long time without saying a word. He looked at her simple black vest, and then at the intelligence burning in her eyes. He had spent his whole life surrounded by people who wanted his money or his power. He knew how to spot a liar, and he could see that Tasha was telling the truth. She wasn't just a girl who got lucky. She was a genius who had been thrown away by the world. Dae-Sung told me he bought that poison from a very expensive supplier, Kang-Woo said. He thought he was being clever. He didn't know the person who actually invented the science behind it was the one pouring his water. He let out a short, dry laugh. The world has a strange way of working, doesn't it? Tasha didn't laugh. He used it wrong. Formula 9 reacts to the tannins in red wine. It creates a tiny oily film on the surface. If he had put it in white wine or water, I might not have seen it in time. He was greedy and sloppy. Kang-Woo stood up and walked over to a small cabinet. He poured 2 glasses of water, plain, clear water, and handed one to her. Tasha took it, her fingers brushing against his. His skin was warm, and he didn't pull away. The people who did this to you, Kang-Woo said, his voice dropping to a low growl. The lab in Seoul. Are they still powerful? They are one of the biggest pharmaceutical boards in the world, Tasha replied. They have lawyers, money, and guards. They think I am a ghost. They think I am defeated. Kang-Woo took a slow sip of his water. I don't like it when people try to kill me. And I especially don't like it when they use stolen toys to do it. You saved my life tonight, Tasha Williams. In my world, we pay our debts. He walked back to his desk and picked up a phone. I have resources that your lab scientists can't even dream of. I have people who can find secrets buried under 100 feet of concrete. You gave me my life back. Now, I think it's time I gave you yours. Tasha looked at him, her eyes wide. What are you saying? I'm saying that the ghost of the lab is finished, Kang-Woo said. I don't need a waitress. I need a strategist. Someone who can see the world molecule by molecule. If you stay with me, I will help you burn down the people who framed you. We will take back your name, and then we will show them what happens when you turn a genius into an enemy. Tasha felt a shiver go down her spine. For years, she had felt powerless. She had been a victim of people with big offices and expensive suits. But looking at Kang-Woo, she realized she had found a different kind of power. He wasn't a hero, but he was a king, and he was offering her a seat at his table. I don't want to just be a chemist, Tasha said, her voice growing stronger. I want them to feel the same fear I felt when they took everything from me. Kang-Woo smiled, and this time it was a look of true partnership. Then we are going to get along just fine. Welcome to the syndicate, Tasha. Let's go see what else Dae-Sung is hiding in his pockets. The next morning, the sunlight did not reach the Onyx Room, but the world felt different to Tasha. She was no longer wearing the black waitress vest or the heavy shoes of a servant. Instead, she sat in a wide leather chair in Kang-Woo's private office, wearing a sharp suit that fit her like armor. On the large monitors on the wall, data was flowing like a digital river. Names, bank accounts, and private emails from the pharmaceutical lab in Seoul were being pulled out of the dark. Kang-Woo stood by the window, his hands behind his back. He had spent the last few hours on the phone with people across the globe. When he spoke, things happened. He didn't need a lab or a microscope to change the world. He had a network of men who could open any door and find any secret. They thought you were a ghost. Tasha, Kang-Woo said, his voice low and steady. They thought they could delete your name and move on. But they forgot that ghosts have memories. And now, they are going to learn that memories can be very expensive. One of Kang-Woo's men, a tall man named Jean who never smiled, walked into the room. He handed a tablet to Tasha. On the screen was a photo of her old boss, the man who had stolen her research and called her a thief. He was at a fancy party in Seoul, smiling and holding a glass of champagne. He looked like a man who didn't have a single worry in the world. This is Dr. Han, Tasha said, her voice tight with a cold anger. He is the one who signed the papers. He is the one who told the police I stole the formula. He won't be smiling for much longer, Jean said. He looked at Kang-Woo for a signal. Kang-Woo nodded once. Cleanse it. All of it. Tasha watched as the syndicate's solution began to work. It wasn't like a science experiment. It was more like a controlled explosion. Kang-Woo's hackers began to move money out of Dr. Han's secret accounts. They sent the real, original research notes, the ones that proved Tasha was the inventor, to every major news station in Korea and America. They leaked the emails where the board members talked about turning the medicine into a weapon. As the hours passed, Tasha saw the news change in real time. Headlines began to pop up on the screens. Corruption at Seoul Pharma, one said. Missing scientist framed by billion-dollar company, said another. The police in Seoul were already knocking on Dr. Han's door. The monsters who had ruined Tasha's life were suddenly the ones hiding from the light. Is this enough? Kang-Woo asked, turning to look at her. We can do more. My men are already waiting outside their homes. We can make sure they never walk into a lab again. Tasha looked at the screen. She saw the fear on Dr. Han's face as he was led away in handcuffs. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders that she had been carrying for years. For a long time, she had thought that science was the only power that mattered. But now she saw that truth combined with power was much stronger. I don't want them dead, Tasha said, her voice clear and strong. I want them to be exactly what I was. I want them to have no name, no money, and no future. I want them to be the ghosts now. Kang-Woo smiled. It was a dark, dangerous smile, but for the first time, Tasha didn't feel afraid of it. She felt like she was a part of it. The lab had tried to turn her into a weapon, and they had succeeded, just not in the way they expected. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was the one holding the catalyst. By the end of the day, Tasha's legal records were wiped clean. The thief was gone. In her place was a woman with a brilliant mind and the backing of the most powerful man in the city. Her past had been cleansed, washed away like the wine she had poured down the drain. She looked at Kang-Woo and realized that her old life was over, but her real work was just beginning. The Onyx Room was quiet, but it was no longer a place of hiding for Tasha Williams. She stood in the center of the private suite, looking down at the black polyester Waitress vest she had worn for nearly 2 years. It felt light in her hands, like a piece of old skin she didn't need anymore. She walked over to the trash can and dropped it inside. It was a simple action, but it felt like slamming a heavy door on her past. She was now wearing a tailored suit of deep navy blue, the fabric soft and expensive against her skin. Her hair was pulled back, and for the first time in years, she wasn't looking at the floor. She was looking straight ahead. Kang-Woo entered the room, his footsteps heavy and confident. He didn't look at the trash can, he looked only at her. He saw a woman who had once been broken by a laboratory, now standing tall in the heart of his empire. He walked to the desk and set a thin, black folder down. Inside were the new deeds to a laboratory facility on the edge of the city, a place that was now hers. The board members who framed you are gone, Kang-Woo said. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of something like pride in it. Their company is falling apart, and their names are being erased from every science journal in the world. You are no longer a thief in their records, Tasha. You are the genius they tried to bury. Tasha picked up the folder. She felt the weight of it, knowing it represented a second chance she never thought she would get. But she also knew that her life wouldn't be about just medicine anymore. She had seen the way the world really worked. She had seen that sometimes you needed a volatile compound like Kang-Woo to fight the monsters in expensive suits. I won't just be making medicine there, Tasha said, her voice sounding stronger than it ever had in the lounge. I'm going to make sure no one ever uses my work to hurt people again. And if your enemies try to use science against you, they will have to go through me first. Kang-Woo nodded. He liked the fire in her eyes. He knew that his syndicate was strong because of his soldiers, but it would be even stronger with a brain like hers. He needed someone who could see the invisible threads of a plan, someone who understood the chemistry of a betrayal before it even happened. You were a ghost in this room for a long time, Kang-Woo said, walking toward the door. But from now on, you are the mind behind everything we do. You aren't just a chemist. Tasha, you are my strategist. Tasha followed him out of the suite, walking past the tables where she used to serve drinks. The other waitresses watched her with wide eyes, surprised to see the clumsy girl walking side by side with the boss. Tasha didn't stop to explain. She didn't need their pity or their friendship anymore. She had a new formula for her life, and it was a perfect balance of intelligence and power. As they stepped out of the subterranean club and into the cool night air, Tasha felt the wind on her face. The city lights were bright, and for the first time, they didn't look like a threat. They looked like a map. She had moved from dissolution to reaction, and finally to synthesis. She was no longer a victim of the shadows. She was the one who controlled them. Beside her, Kang-Woo opened the door to a dark car, waiting for her to step inside. Tasha took one last look at the entrance to the Onyx Room, then turned away. She had found her place at the king's right hand, not as a servant, but as the most dangerous woman in the underworld. The experiment was over, and the result was exactly what she had hoped for.